and welcome, and thank you so much for choosing this particular seminar. We're very fortunate to have Andy Lewis with us today. He's going to be speaking about Scripture at the heart of the school. He is an author of a number of Catholic RE books and textbooks. He is a deputy head teacher in East London and has run many Catholic leadership courses at local and national level. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path. Scripture is not something which we can limit to RE lessons and acts of worship. It really needs to permeate all aspects of Catholic school life. But what does this mean in reality? It cannot just be scripture, quotes on the wall, and at the top of politics. It must be more than that and reflect the genuine ethos and quotes on the wall and the mission of life. So we'll look at different ways that this is possible in policy and practice, and to consider all of those things with responsibility for Catholic and RE leadership. So thank you very much.
Okay, it is an absolute pleasure to be here with you today, and I think one of the things that's really important is for us as an organisation, when we're thinking about how we support Catholic RE teachers, is to recognise that the work of the RE teachers, the work of the RE leads in primary, the work of the people that are kind of in that department, curriculum area, actually in a Catholic school, quite rightly should go way beyond that. And so that's what we're going to be looking at a little bit today. And I'm quite grateful. I did have a few nervous moments during Brendan's talk. Brendan is a good friend of mine, and I kind of thought, as he started to speak, probably should have spoken to him beforehand to make sure we didn't overlap too much. I feel like he was quite a good warm-up act for what we're doing today. And if Brendan could be a warm-up act, you're not doing too badly. I'll be honest, whenever I'm doing kind of a Seven-Days at School, celebrations of the word, or kind of presentations, I do try to bring in some bits of artwork, and because I think it just gives us a useful kind of framing. And when I was doing this, there was lots of thoughts going on in my mind as to what I could deliver today that would be meaningful, useful, some takeaways, because ultimately that's what you want to come for. You want to come to a conference and come away with something that might be useful, a selection of ideas of which you can pick a couple from. And when Brendan was talking about this idea of a renaissance, I think there was also a part of me that was thinking about the imagery, the journey to Emmaus, which I think for me is one of the stories I love the most, because it's that whole revelation. I mean, Brendan talked about salvation history, and this is on the salvation history slot. I will make some reference to that. But I think it's that journey of revelation that, actually, when we're thinking about Scripture, we're walking alongside Scripture the whole time. We don't always know it. We don't always realise it. We don't always make the most of it. So perhaps it's our Renaissance, perhaps it's our Emmaus moment. I don't know. Perfect, it is working all okay. So I kind of put out there a little bit about what I was going to try and do today, and hopefully, you can tell me over lunch whether I've managed to succeed or not. The scripture that I kind of came to when I was, because I thought if you're doing something about scripture, you need to really focus it yourself on what you're trying to do. And I was kind of searching around, because I think quite often our relationship with Scripture is often a search. I know sometimes when you open kind of like a Gideon's Bible, it's got that little bit at the beginning or the end where it guides you to particular Scripture for particular moments in your life, if you're suffering from grief and so on. I think that can be really useful, but sometimes it doesn't quite fit, and also sometimes I think it's nice to find it yourself. That search, that kind of, the Bible's a really big book with a lot in it, but that search for us as to something that kind of stands out and is meaningful. And I'll be honest, the whole idea of kind of Lectio Divina, the Brendan kind of reference, and I'll come back to in a second, that's not something I was exposed to when I was younger. That's something I've kind of come to a little bit later in life. And there's probably not many conferences that you would go and speak at where you think, actually, I need to actually spend some time in prayer here. People have come a long way. People have got very limited choices in the seminars that they go to, and it's really important I get this right. And so there was an element of prayer in preparation for this as well. And again, there's not many conferences where you would say that, but this is the one that stuck with me. And I wouldn't say it was one that, it's not my favourite Bible verse or anything like that. but really this idea when we're thinking about Scripture at the heart of our schools, and the Word and the living Word, really about that light in the darkness, that direction that we're kind of looking for, that should help us navigate our way through the challenges that are working in any Catholic school. It's not easy. You might have come across the author and speaker Jonathan Doyle, who's over in the Australia, and he's someone that I'm very grateful to have developed a friendship with him. And he wrote a book a few years ago about kind of tools and fuels, it's called, and it was about this idea that what is it that keeps us going? Schools are really hard places to work in. They're really tough. We are exhausted at the end of every day, let alone every week and every half term. What is it that kind of sustains us? What is it that guides us? And maybe Scripture can be one of those things. Maybe Scripture is one of those things that really can help us in our kind of navigation. And so, as I said, this is something that I kind of came to and kept coming back to, about what are the things that can light our path, what are the things that can sustain us, what are the things that can really help us through these challenging times that exist in education, in our schools, in our Catholic schools. So maybe it's that source of wisdom for you, and as I said, maybe these are the things that we could be better at finding for ourselves. Now, when I started to plan this as well, I was like, well, let's go to some of the kind of greatest hits of Catholic education. And I thought, right, let's Christ at the centre, let's go here. And I thought this is quite interesting, because obviously someone will probably correct me in here. It's had a few editions. I think the first one was written in 96.
I think so.
Yes? No? A few people nodding along. Don't worry, it's not a test. I thought, right, brilliant, let's go and see what does Christ at the Centre say about Scripture, because surely this is all about kind of Scripture. And we've kind of got, lots of bits in Scripture, about Scripture, and then I thought, right, so how many times does Christ at the Centre mention the Bible? None. How many times does it mention Scripture? None. But it does. Oh, no, I've broken the board now. Bishop Stock is watching over me. Come back to us. Come on. Oh, that's well and truly broken. We've got it on camera as well. Good. Right, so Christ at the Centre. Hey, we're in business. Please. No. Right, let's try it again. Take it out, put it back in. That normally works, doesn't it? No signal. Come on, think about it. Hey! It does mention the gospel without values, because gospel values, I mean, that's good. It's a lot of mentions in Christ at the Centre. But gospel without values, 10 mentions. Okay? So I just found that quite interesting, this kind of, this document, which, we tell everyone that they need to read if they want a job in a Catholic school, doesn't actually have Scripture at the heart itself. Okay, that's not criticism. I don't want the headline to this session be "And Lewis says Christ at the Centre is rubbish." It's not at all. I think it's still a vitally important document. But it's interesting that perhaps what Brendan was talking about this need for Renaissance is quite an interesting one in terms of even some of our key documents don't have that huge focus on kind of Scripture. I don't know if any of you saw, I got asked to write an article in Networking magazine, which has just come up. It was quite nice because it gave me an opportunity to give it a push for the conference. If you saw the conference in there, and that's why you're here, brilliant, fantastic. But it was around kind of this idea of Scripture at the heart of the RED. Again, kind of Brendan referenced that. And, I think it has been one of the challenges of the implementation of the RED that actually there is a lot more Scripture. And I know it's, some teachers, it's been one of their moans, one of their gripes, but I think it is really, really important that the RED is doing that. Because I think, even Bishop Stock has kind of forgotten a little bit about Scripture. It's important for us. There's some interesting things. I'm not going to read through my whole article because that would just be a boring session, and you can do that in your own time. If you haven't got a copy, let me know. But you know, one of the things that I always find quite fascinating, and I do reference it in here, is that, you know, even Richard Dawkins, yeah, who, you know, you probably didn't think he was going to get a mention at a Catholic RE conference. Even Richard Dawkins, if you read his book, The God Delusion, he points out 129 biblical phrases from the King James Version that are now common in our English language, but actually most Christians don't even know when their holy book, their Bible, is being used in conversation. And Richard Dawkins ridicules us for it, okay? Because actually, as Brendan says, you know, probably as a Catholic community, we're not very good at reading the Bible. We're not as good as we should be, potentially, okay? And I think, you know, when I was doing, as part of this article, because I always feel that it's really important to talk to other people, because, you know, you can have these ideas in your head and you might be right and you might be wrong. But, you know, one of the people that I spoke to when I was writing this article is a fantastic woman, Mar Carswell, Dr. Mar Carswell, who lives over in Australia. So trying to organise kind of a bit of an interview with her was, you know, not without challenge. But she's so incredibly informed and wise about kind of Catholic RE, and you know the issues we discussed, and this is why it is potentially so important to have Scripture at the heart of the RED, at the heart of the school, to have this renaissance that Brendan was talking around. Is, you know, first of all, I think we've been quite limited, and Mark was quite brutal about that in some respects, that we've actually limited ourselves to quite a small bit of Scripture. And yes, of course, the Gospels are the most important thing for us. Of course they are. But do we just stop there? Because actually, the Gospels have a context. You know, we've got all the formation of the early church and the letters that come after it, but we've got that whole thing that came before it. And, you know, it's really easy to remember, and I know it blows the minds of your students that Jesus was a Jew. It always blows their minds. Like, what? You know, students can never get their head around that Jesus and his disciples, yeah, they were faithful and practicing Jews. Oh, but they stopped all that. They gave all that up and become Christians. Well, no, they didn't. They were Jews. That was them. But the issues we kind of talked about, really, and these are the issues that you are facing, okay? And I get it, because we're facing it too. I'm deputy head in a school. In a minute, we've got a full RE department, which is great. It feels like we're a little bit unique in that, particularly when you look in the TS, you know, just an amount of adverts out there. That was my session 2 years ago. But, right, practicing Catholic staff and students, you know, that's a challenge. I was reading something, I don't know if you picked this up the other day. In Catholic schools in Belgium, you have to have a certificate, you have to have your baptism certificate to go in a Catholic school in Belgium. Well, you did, because they've just changed that rule. And I was like, wow. You know, thinking about your kind of staff in your school, how many of them would he identify as kind of even Christian, let alone be a practicing Catholic? Even your RE teachers, you know. Then we've also got kind of the teacher knowledge of Scripture, particularly teachers that have perhaps gone through an education system, gone through an RE system, even in a Catholic school, where there hasn't been a lot of Scripture. That's a challenge. You know, our shifting demographics of our schools, you know, maybe you're in a school with 100% baptised Catholics, practising Catholics. You know, my diocese, Brentwood, the bishop said us to get rid of the certificate of practice, because actually you should only have a certificate of practice when you're oversubscribed. And who is? You know? And I think, you know, these are the challenges that we face. And, you know, actually, perhaps Scripture in itself has some of the answers. Perhaps. Okay? And I did, you know, that was kind of Brennan's big poster for his Word on Fire conference, and it was a useful reminder to me for, you know, St Jerome, who, you know, did have in his life a great dedication to Scripture, to the Bible, that actually if we want to know Christ, and if we are putting Christ at the centre, then we really can't have that ignorance of Scripture, not only in our teaching, on a personal level, but also on a school level. And probably what I'm going to look at most in today's session really is around kind of on a school level. I thought it is really important that we do kind of, as I'm in the salvation history thread, or section today, the idea of kind of salvation history, which is a big and difficult idea that can sometimes scare us off a little bit. Although it is a key feature of clearly the RED that we're now teaching. The golden thread of it really is who we are and what we're about. That story of being saved is why we are who we are. And we can't get away from that. We can't ignore that. But actually, what I am proposing, hopefully, and your takeaway ideas, would be some ways in which we can kind of start to put this golden thread through our schools. It's got to be more than our RE lessons. It really, really has. And if we're saying that Scripture is so important, is so good, is so life-changing, transformational, actually it is more important that it is throughout. A few years ago now, because he's passed away probably a good 15 years ago now, Monsignor George Stokes was the education director in my diocese in Brentwood. And Monsignor George Stokes, fantastic, amazing man, did a lot of work on the former RE directories. I never know how true it is, but he always used to take the credit for the levels. Remember the old 1 to 8? For those who've been teaching long enough? Father George always used to take credit for that. I don't know if it was him personally and so on, but he certainly did a lot for kind of driving RE forward in terms of kind of actually having assessment and things like that. And he always used to talk about the fact that, our faith has got to be, he always used the stick or rock analogy, the words that go right through it. And again, I think there's that question for us, does our faith go right through our schools, but does Scripture go right through our schools? So thank you, Father George, we're still using that stick or rock analogy. So I'm not going to read through all these ideas. I think we're going to put all of these on the website if you want to take photos, or if you want to grab my email later or whatever. I'm not going to read through everything here, but I just want to put forward a few ideas really, and I'm not pretending these are the only ideas, and you've probably got some amazing ideas in your schools as well. One of the things I think is really important, particularly if your school's like my school, you need a policy. You just got a key. Key's got policies on everything, yeah? Or now we just put in ChatGPT, don't we? Write me a policy on. But what's unique about our policies? What's different about our policies? Or have we just got the off-the-shelf policies from the Key or ChatGPT? And again, I kind of did a bit of work on this in my current school now, but it was with the former head teacher, and I kind of raised this question and said, well, actually, what's unique about our policies? What's distinct? What's different about our policies from all the other secondary schools in Newham? And he then wrote a paragraph, and that one paragraph that did have some Scripture in it, and it did have a bit about Catholic education and so on. That one paragraph then went to the policy. We've now done some work where actually we need more than that. I think our very public policies, things like our behaviour policies, I've got to be honest, that's probably one of the policies that many schools use the most. I know I do as kind of pastoral deputy. Where does that fit? But actually, does your behaviour policy really, really reflect the Catholic faith, the Catholic mission? Does it have kind of Scripture as its kind of foundation, really? So my argument would be that each policy should be Scripture informed, should have some Scripture in it, but it just can't be the one bit the whole way through. Surely we're a bit better than that. It does take a bit of skill, does take a bit of expertise, and I think that could be a challenge within your school if you've got no one with a theology degree. Okay, but arguably I'd say you don't need a theology degree to understand the Bible. I think there's a great simplicity sometimes about our faith, and we can overcomplicate it. Again, kind of some of our pastoral care, wellbeing policies, not just for students but for staff as well. I don't think we can forget that we can't just talk about the policies that we do unto the students. It's for our staff, it's for our community as well. What is distinct about working in your Catholic school? What's different about working in your Catholic school to working elsewhere? Again, kind of there's quite rightly, been big pushes over the last few years around kind of inclusion and diversity policies. We've got a whole treasury of scripture that we can use to inform those things. Okay, we don't need some kind of corporate diversity and inclusion policy that big business might have. Because actually we're better than that. We've got something. We have got this amazing resource that really can be at the heart of who we are and what we're about. Again, if any of you are in a position where you've been involved in disciplinary procedures with kind of staff, again, there's some of the hardest things. Absolutely, they are. Absolutely heartbreaking at times, but they're also important. The reality is, if someone is not doing their job, or if someone is detrimental to the mission of your school, you absolutely need to have these things. But how can we make sure that policy, like the behaviour policy, if you're talking about excluding a child, some people think, we should never exclude children, but actually sometimes we need to. Sometimes we need to have those lines. The rich young man, Jesus made it very clear. That's the line. But if you are going to exclude someone, how are you still going to make sure it's done in the right way? Again, if you're going to sack someone, if you are going to terminate their employment and potentially jeopardise their ability to ever get a job in a school again, okay? And again, some people say, well, you should never do that as Catholic schools. The reality is sometimes you have to. But how are you going to do that with a level of confidence that you are acting in mission of Catholic education, that you have done that kind of really soul searching, that prayer? I've been involved in permanent exclusions. I've been involved in staff disciplinaries. I've had to pray. I've had to look to scripture because I need something. I need something to help work out how all of this, we have restorative processes, but sometimes they don't work, okay? But we've got to give those models. We've kind of got to make sure that actually we are embedding rather than just an add-on, because an add-on's never going to work. An add-on's not who we are really about, okay? Our faith is not an add-on. Our faith should be at the heart of who we are and what we do, individually and as a community. Again, I'm not going to read through all these. I mean, Brendan talked about this idea of Lectio Divina in staff meetings, Again, there's different ways of doing these things. A lot of people start with a prayer. Sometimes they start with the same prayer. When I was doing my kind of research, there was a school that said, we've got to have prayer for meetings. We have this one prayer for meetings. But again, sometimes you have different meetings about different things. And actually, wouldn't it be useful to think maybe, we've got the agenda. What's the scripture that might guide us through this agenda? What's the scripture, what's the verse that actually we're going to pause upon that might help us inform the decisions that we've got to make? Again, I was in a school just about a month or so ago. I love this idea, I stole it. Every CPD session they do starts with some scripture. And again, in the New Testament, there's loads of bits, there's loads of resources around being good teachers and good communicators of the message. But again, it's really easy to get bogged down and we need outstanding teaching and learning in this school. Yeah, of course you do. And that's part of our mission of Catholic education. But actually, each of those things that we're delivering, can we find ways of kind of grounding it in different bits of scripture? And again, when we're talking about kind of the lectionary exposing us to lots of different bits of scripture, actually by doing these things, we're exposing our staff to lots of different bits of scripture, particularly our non-Catholic staff. Yeah, I mean, because probably some of our non-teaching, non-Catholic staff will be really used to certain things. Oh, the golden rule, yeah, I've heard that a lot of times. But actually, how do we broaden that exposure? How do we broaden that exposure to different bits of kind of scripture? Again, kind of, when we've got pastoral CPD, whatever the CPD is, thought it's such a beautiful idea. And actually, not always the person leading the CPD has got that expertise. So actually, it was the head teacher in that school. The head teacher asks for the slides that we shared, not so he can check up on them, but he can look through, because he considered himself, someone who had that level of expertise. So he could then look through, work out the most appropriate scripture, so he could open that to the rest of the staff. Teaching and learning, I've kind of already mentioned this, but again, our cross-curricular links, again, that takes a bit of time and a little bit of space to find those opportunities. And again, I think we're quite good when we say, a big fan, yeah, Father George Lemaitre is a Catholic priest. That's great, that's important, but also let's look a little bit more around kind of what we can find in the Holy Book to kind of just reinforce all of these things. And again, this, it is sometimes a bit of a question of expertise, but if we're thinking about what a genuine Catholic curriculum is, it might be that the RE lead in primary or the RE curriculum leader, maybe they do have to do a bit of work with their other curriculum leaders, their other subject leads. But actually, surely that is part of our job. If we're we could be the one person in school with a theology degree of some kind. I know there's lots of different TRS-related degrees. We could be the expert. Maybe that's the question you need to say to your teacher. Well, actually, I need a bit more time and space here because I want to work with all of our other leaders to do this. Don't quote me when you're making that request. But again, kind of, scripture in displays and classrooms. How do we kind of make all of those connections? How do we kind of, as I said, kind of really embed these things? Again, kind of Brendan talked about it. Look, it's quite nice. It's worked all very nicely. Our drama, our art, our creative work. How do we bring scripture into that? Again, kind of in pastoral care. How do we? I always think Catholic schools generally, a bit of a generalisation, seem to be quite exceptional at pastoral care. Yeah, they're generally very, very good. We're not the only ones that are good at it. I think we have to be a little bit careful of that. We can't just say that other schools are rubbish at it. We're great at it. It's not true. But actually, how do we resolve conflict? How do we support in moments of crises? And I, as pastoral deputy myself, I see I've got some amazing year leaders. They just don't sometimes have time to even breathe because they're so busy. Okay, any of you that have got pastoral responsibilities, it's crazy out there. But actually, finding time to kind of come back to these kind of things is important. Again, how do we get scripture out there into our wider community? Do we put scripture in our newsletters, in our social media posts? Because every school now, you're always kind of conscious of how do we market ourselves. Does scripture make us more or less appealing to the students we're trying to recruit? Do we want to keep just posting bits from the Bible? But actually, if we don't, are we being true to who we are? How can we kind of invite our parents, our wider community, into kind of our celebrations that involve scripture? It's not always that easy. There are things to overcome sometimes. Do we share scripture with families? There are some resources that you can kind of buy to do this. But actually, when we know that we are the church, because let's be honest, even our Catholic students don't go to Mass as often as they did, certainly before COVID and so on. When you start talking about the gospel from last Sunday, you've got these confused faces. But actually, if we are the church, how are we providing that exposure to kind of scripture? Again, kind of thinking about how maybe we collaborate with our parishes as well. Again, kind of we know, different parishes, different parish priests certainly operate in different ways. Well, I then wanted to kind of look at some other kind of more practical kind of opportunities. Loads of primary schools have buddy benches. But again, when we think, for those of you who are not aware, buddy benches is when you're feeling a bit lonely. You haven't any friends that day, go and sit on the bench, and then someone else who's feeling a bit lonely goes and sits on the bench as well. But where can we seek those opportunities? Could that be a Good Samaritan bench? because all of a sudden you're calling it the Good Samaritan bench, and at some point you probably have to explain, and all right, the Good Samaritan is probably a story that we are quite good at teaching, okay? But again, it's that vocabulary. It's saying that actually, we're not having a buddy bench just because, you know, every other school's got one. We're doing a buddy bench because actually we think the principles of the Good Samaritan about helping out others who are in need is important to us and who we are. Let's not be apologetic about that. Again, some of you, PSPs, personal pastoral support plans, called different things in different places. Quite often they're used for students who are at risk of exclusion as the last try. You know, actually, could we call them something like a Damascus plan? Actually, we're looking for that change of heart. Okay? Again, you probably at some point going to have to explain to your staff about the story of the road to Damascus, and you know how actually that moment of conversion, that person that was persecuting Christians became one of the most important Christians. You know, one of those amazing transformations. And if we don't believe that that is possible about students as well, you know, perhaps we're selling something short. We, you know, as a secondary school, of all boys in East London, we of course have our internal suspension room. What used to be called our internal exclusion room, which I never quite worked out, was felt a little bit odd. But I know we're not alone on that. You're either internal or you're external. But anyway, so we've called ours the Emmaus room, and it amazed me how quick it stuck with staff. And again, every staff member has to have this story explained to them. You know, we like the idea of students, you know, they're walking through their life in school, doing all these naughty and disruptive things, but actually Jesus is with them. And even when they're feeling the right hump, because they're in our Emmaus room, Jesus is with them. So that's something that we have, and again, I'm just putting it out there. Other people use Emmaus for other parts of their school, which is kind of great as well. The Ark as the send area. That was one of the other members of the exec came up with that, or shared that idea, I should say, didn't come up with it, shared that idea, because that's what they call it in their school, that they are away from the waves and the storm in a haven that is safe for them. I thought that's it, nicking that one, you know, but again, kind of you need, not only for them to know the story, and again, Noah's Ark, probably a story they know, but actually, that meaning, that importance there. Doing my research, I came across a school that calls their staff induction, their staff and their student induction programs the Zacchaeus program, because everyone is called to their school and then changed by coming to their school. I thought, good on you for having that kind of absolute confidence in what you do and that confidence of your induction program that you're going to change people like Zacchaeus was. You know, like, let's be clear about what we do here. Again, like, just opportunities. This is where it gets a little bit controversial. I think we're really good at using the saints. I think we're really good. There's no problem with the saints. I mean, I walked in here today, I don't know if anyone works at the school, you know, all these fantastic, you know, models of faith, you know, clear examples, you know, and you know, that's all very good. Do we sometimes forget some of the figures in the Bible? You know, some of the amazing women of the Old Testament. Again, we can look at them in the RED, and I think there's another session on them today. But do you know what I mean? Let's not forget, when we're talking about the saints, what are really important, that actually we've got some really good and important people in the Bible as well. Getting some artwork, okay. I mean, hold on, correct me if I'm right. Hasn't someone got this on the wall in their school?
I think they've, yes, made them.
Yeah, like a wall
corridor.
mural, yeah. If not, we've got some posters of that. I don't know if any of you have come across the work of Jason Ramazari. Works in a Catholic, or did work in a Catholic school, graphic designer. He's got these amazing little booklets. I think they're only like £1 of salvation history. I've got a little one in my office. And in his school, I can't remember what it is. I'm sure it is Portsmouth Diocese. They've got like down the whole wall salvation history. Looks amazing. Again, kind of, we quite often see these around school. They're great. You know, really cheap on Etsy, apparently. You can get some really cheap ones on Etsy. But again, I think there's something interesting about, you know, where we see them in school. Do we just see them on the main thoroughfare? You know, is it just head teacher's office? or actually is it in more places? Have departments got some scripture that links to their department in their office, for example, or above their office door? You know, there'd be something really powerful in that, maybe. That's it, I'm done. Okay? I'm running the London Marathon for CAFOD, so I thought I'd end by just having a little plug for that. No, thank you for coming today. I'm really conscious it's lunchtime. I'm going to stay here for a bit if you've got any questions. Hopefully that's given you some ideas to take away. That was the whole idea. It was a bit of a kind of just selection of different ideas. But let's be part of this Renaissance, as Brennan says. You know, because I think I said again, something that stuck with me about, you know, if it's not going to be us, who is it going to be? You know, actually, if we are not the people, we're not the people that are going to make Scripture interesting, make Scripture appealing, if we're not the people that are going to put Scripture at the heart of our students' lives and our colleagues' lives, if we're not going to do it, what chance has our faith got? What chance has the Catholic Church got if we can't do something with Scripture that inspires and transforms lives? Thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure. I'm here all day. Come and criticise. Don't say I'm wrong.